So in this video, we're going to take a look at the use of the flex box. And what we want to do with the flex box is kind of allow us to do a little more adaptive screen layout, if you will, depending on how a user may be resizing their document or the browser window, or sometimes it may be the different screen sizes that they're using. If we take a look at what we have here on the screen, we've got Visual Studio Code open, and we have a couple of P tags inside of our div class here, and we've got some inline CSS styling, and all of this is doing is basically applying some margins, padding, and a background color to our document, which is displayed over here in the browser window. You'll notice that we're displaying these one on top of the other, and that if we resize the browser window, that layout doesn't really change other than the paragraphs get longer and the text stops wrapping. We've got the nice little background color in it just so we can see the individual P tags or the P elements that we have in the document. So one of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to implement some CSS to help us style and work with this Flexbox design or the Flexbox concept that we want to cover here. You'll notice that our div class on the other side of our P tags is actually specified with an FC class, and then each one of our P elements has a class specified for it as well. So what we're going to do within our inline style tag is we're going to go ahead and work with our div element first. So we specified it as an FC class, so we use that dot at the beginning of it for FC. And then what we're going to do is we're basically going to say we want to display that as a flex. So we want that div to be displayed as a flex. And how we want that to function is we're going to make use of something called flex flow. So we specify the flex flow attribute, and then we say we want it to wrap on the row. So we'll do a row wrap with this particular one. And then as we close out on that particular style element itself, then we now see that we will have some styling applied to the div element. And let's go ahead and refresh our browser. And you'll notice, first of all, one of the things that we saw here was that we had a little bit of space that was put between the rows. So that's just kind of one of the smallest things that has basically taken change in our appearance for this particular div tag. But it's still not doing much outside of that same resizing that we saw for the length of the P tags themselves. So as a result, what we need to do now is go and apply a little bit of styling to our P elements. And those are not specifically a class, this is just an element, so we don't need the dot in front of here, so we'll just use the P. And then what we're going to say is we want the flex on this particular instance for the P to represent 1. So we give it a value of 1 on that flex. And what that basically means is that we want it to be kind of equally spaced, if you will. Let's take a look at what happens when we refresh. If we resize our browser window, you'll see that we have now all of our P elements next to each other, right or left to right. And if we start to resize the browser window, then you'll start to see some changes. So the flex boxes will change a little bit, our P elements rather are changing slightly, and the smaller we get, the more the changes take place. Now you'll notice that when we get a little bit smaller, we keep 3 next to each other and drop 1 down below. That's just kind of the behavior, if you will, of how that's functioning. And the smaller we go, the more that layout changes. So we've dropped to basically a 2x2 grid, if you will. So we can kind of change that behavior a little bit more. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to change how much of the weight, if you will, that one of these particular P elements has. And in that case, what we're going to do is specify the class for the second P element that we had in there. And within the styling for that one, we will simply give it a flex, and we'll specify 2 on this particular one. What that basically means is that when we change that, we change the weighting for how that gets displayed. So element number 2, as you can see, now is roughly twice as wide as the other elements here. And even as we start to resize down to a little bit smaller, it still kind of maintains a little bit of that aspect ratio. So it's almost twice as wide as the other elements. So again, that 1 means that we want all of our P elements to kind of be roughly the same size, so it's kind of like an equal division in terms of the width for that element. And then by calling out a specific element, in this case the class for the second one, which was down here, we've indicated kind of an overriding effect, if you will, for 2, and that specifies it to be almost twice as wide. However, as you can see, we can't really say it's twice as wide when one of our elements drops below the other 3. So just a quick rundown of using the Flexbox in our HTML5 documents and how we've basically defined how the div will behave and then how certain P elements within that div will behave as well.